Death is the boundary between two unknowns. We know it is inevitable, but what happens afterward remains a matter of faith, conjecture, and philosophical reflection. One of the most perplexing questions that has troubled minds for centuries is, what happens to the soul if the body is cremated? Does it lose its way? Does it disappear? Or does it continue its journey into eternity, regardless of the fate of the body? Let's look at this issue from different angles: religious, philosophical, metaphysical, and scientific. In ancient cultures, such as those of medieval Europe and Asia, cremation was perceived as a bridge between the earthly and the spiritual. During the Bronze and Iron Ages, fire came to symbolize transformation, the release of the burden of the physical shell. In what is now the Indian subcontinent, where Buddhism and Hinduism are deeply rooted, cremation took on special significance. The body of Gautama Buddha was cremated, and his ashes were carried to sacred stupas, symbols of spiritual liberation. This practical action embodied the idea that the soul, freed from the body, continues its journey, freed from earthly shackles. Greece and Rome, heirs to Hellenistic traditions and anthropocentric ideas, added their own nuances to the understanding of cremation. The Greeks believed that fire facilitated the soul's transition to the afterlife, avoiding torment and suffering. The Romans adopted this custom, preserving ashes in columbaria, special places of remembrance. This practice harmoniously aligns with the philosophy that the soul and body are distinct entities, and that the death of the body does not mean the disappearance of the individual. Even the Old Testament mentions cremation. King Saul and his sons who fell in battle were burned with honors, which served as a sign of respect and faith in the afterlife. Slavic beliefs integrated fire into the mystery of transition in their own way. They believed that the soul would be purified through flame. Cremation before sunrise symbolized the soul receiving the energy of the god Yarilo. This was not simply the burning of the body, but a profound ritual designed to elevate the soul to another world, making it light and bright, capable of shining as brightly as the sun. This view demonstrates that fire is not the soul's enemy, but its ally on its journey. This explains why burning was desirable and even necessary, since fire strengthened the spiritual principle. Christianity, however, has its own history with cremation. At the dawn of the new religious paradigm, cremation was associated with pagan customs that were viewed with distrust. By the 4th century, many European tribes abandoned cremation in favor of burial in the ground, considering the latter method closer to biblical beliefs. At the end of the 8th century, Charlemagne banned cremation under penalty of death, which restored traditional burials to the status quo for a millennium. However, in the 20th century, beginning with the opening of a crematorium in Vladivostok, the situation began to change, and the practice of cremation gradually penetrated into secular life, despite continued religious caution. The Church's position today is ambiguous. Many Christian denominations permit cremation, while clergy advise in-ground burial for traditional symbolism and to comfort relatives. In the 1950s, the Holy Synod of the Russian Orthodox Church expressed leniency toward cremation, but still considers it less desirable. It is especially worth noting that religious traditions such as Islam and Judaism firmly oppose cremation, basing their doctrine on the resurrection of the same body. These religions perceive cremation as a violation of the divine order and the foundation of faith, where the body has sacred significance in the afterlife. Esoteric views offer a different approach to the subject of the soul and fire. Many mystical teachings believe that cremation helps the soul more quickly separate from the earthly plane. Fire is seen as the element of purification, liberation from weaknesses and attachments. However, there are warnings. If the soul has not yet realized the death of the physical body, flames can cause disorientation and fear. In such teachings, it is customary to wait several days before cremation to allow the soul time to transition and avoid suffering. This reminds us that in the realm of metaphysics, questions about the soul and its destiny carry a tinge of subjectivity and depend on faith and worldview. Modern science is studying consciousness from a different perspective. Neurophysiology has yet to answer questions about the existence of the soul as an independent entity, but it has documented the phenomenon of out-of-body consciousness during clinical death. People who have experienced temporary death report unusual experiences, encounters with the deceased, and a sense of leaving the body. These testimonies add new meaning to the discussion of the soul, neither confirming nor rejecting traditional views. In the field of quantum physics, hypotheses are being discussed regarding the preservation of the energy of consciousness after death, which calls into question the role of the physical body and the inexorability of its destruction. The psychological aspect of cremation also deserves attention. For many loved ones, the sight of a burning body evokes painful emotions associated with farewell and acceptance of loss. Research shows that the form of burial does not affect the depth of grief. What matters is the ritual, which allows one to express feelings, honor the memory, and begin the healing process. Ashes in an urn become a symbol of life, a connection with the departed, and modern environmental concerns make cremation an attractive option, reducing the impact on nature and the urban landscape. The historical and cultural context that shapes attitudes toward cremation and the soul is no less important. The evolution of human thought, from primitive beliefs to global religions, reveals a growing understanding of the relationship between fire and the immortal. This is not just a ritual, it is a mirror reflecting our attitude toward death, life, and that which transcends the physical. With each rekindling of the flame, our belief in the soul takes on new forms, adapting to the demands of the times. Thus, cremation and the fate of the soul within it are a question not only of theology, but also of history, psychology, and philosophy. Through the prism of eras and cultures, we see a diversity of approaches and connections, where the soul is not lost but rather gains new horizons. After all, what begins its journey with the body in the flames does not disappear with it, but rather is freed for the next stage of existence. Moving from ancient myths and rituals to modern views, we come closer to understanding that the body and soul are distinct realms, connected yet free. As we continue to explore the soul's journey after death and the role cremation plays in our perceptions, it is important to remember this fascinating duality and multifaceted perspective, which opens up new horizons for understanding life and the transition to another dimension. The soul after death, a metaphysical and scientific perspective. The question of whether there is a connection between the soul and body after death remains one of the most mysterious and controversial. Many religious traditions believe that the soul leaves the physical body at the moment of death, freeing itself from its earthly shell, and begins its journey to the next world. Eastern teachings emphasize that the body is merely a temporary shell for the soul, and that a person's true essence is unaffected by its physical transformations. It is this view of the immortality of the soul that formed the basis for spiritual ideas about life after death, and explains why the method of burial does not affect its fate. Modern research into near-death experiences confirms unusual experiences among people who have been close to death. Many report seeing themselves floating above their own bodies, observing the sky, or moving through a glowing tunnel. They also describe encounters with departed loved ones and a sense of inner peace. This evidence leads scientists and philosophers to speculate that consciousness may exist in a state separate from biological form, although definitive proof of this is still lacking. In esotericism, there is the concept of the astral plane, a space where the soul can reside after physical death. Some schools teach that cremation accelerates the soul's separation from the body, helping it avoid confusion and stagnation on the material plane. However, some believe that fire can cause shock to a soul that has not yet fully realized its liberation, leading to temporary disorientation or a delay in the transition. Therefore, some traditions recommend waiting several days before cremation to give the soul the opportunity to calmly let go of earthly life. From a neurophysiological perspective, consciousness is considered a product of brain activity. However, the emergence of phenomena of extra-physical consciousness during clinical death highlights the complexities of this explanation. Some scientists hypothesize that consciousness is a form of energy that can persist after biological functions cease. Quantum physics offers models in which information or conscious energy continues to exist in other forms, suggesting that the death of the body does not necessarily lead to the disappearance of consciousness or the soul. Regardless of one's perspective, most spiritual teachings maintain that the soul is an immaterial substance, not subject to destruction by fire or decay. Therefore, cremation does not harm the soul or limit its journey. For loved ones, the emotional aspect remains important. Farewell rituals provide an opportunity to express grief, honor the memory, and let go. Psychologists emphasize that the form of the funeral rite does not affect the internal acceptance of loss, as long as it is filled with meaning and respect. World religions have varying views on cremation. Hinduism and Buddhism consider cremation a natural and logical process for the liberation of the soul. Islam and Judaism reject this method of burial, as the body must be buried whole, which is linked to the doctrine of the resurrection of the body on the Day of Judgment. Christianity long advocated burial, but today many faiths accept cremation, recognizing that the soul is independent of the state of the body. Interestingly, even among practitioners of spiritualism and exorcism, there is no consensus. Some consider cremation unimportant to the fate of the soul, while others believe the correct timing and method of performing the ritual are essential for a smooth transition. Slavic and Scandinavian traditions viewed fire as a means of cleansing from sins, symbolizing the transformation of the soul and facilitating its path to the gods. In these cultures, flames do not destroy the soul, but liberate it from earthly bonds. One important aspect remains: the understanding that the soul and body are distinct entities that are not necessarily connected after death. While the physical body is subject to change and decay, the soul, according to many beliefs, continues to exist, is reborn, or unites with a higher power. This worldview helps many people find solace and faith in the continuation of life beyond this earthly existence. Moreover, technical and scientific data on consciousness and its properties are constantly expanding, leaving room for new hypotheses. It's important to emphasize that every point of view has its supporters and critics. However, they all agree on one thing: death is not an end, but a transformation of state, a transition from one form of existence to another. This helps us understand that the destruction of the body by fire in no way negates the existence of an immaterial entity. Thus, examining the religious, philosophical, esoteric, and scientific aspects, we can conclude: cremation is not a barrier to the soul, but rather one way of saying goodbye to the body. The process of combustion does not destroy the immaterial essence, which, according to many teachings, possesses an eternal nature. The soul is freed from earthly limitations and continues its journey into new dimensions of existence, into the unknown beyond life. Based on the above, we can move on to examining specific practices and customs associated with ashes after cremation, as well as the impact of these rituals on the memory and emotional state of the living. After all, understanding doesn't end at the moment of separation. It continues in the ways we interact with those who have passed away. The psychology, rituals, and meaning of cremation today. The psychological experience of cremation for relatives is often deeply emotional. For many, the sight of flames engulfing the body of a loved one becomes a test of the soul. This moment seems cruel and irreversible, especially for those raised in a culture with a tradition of inhumation. However, the procedure itself, despite its outward appearance, does not change the essence of the person's passing. Psychologists point out that the emotions at the farewell depend not so much on the burial method as on the opportunity to express one's pain and respect. Cremation farewell rituals are incredibly important because they help people cope with the loss. For example, an urn ceremony, a cemetery for ashes, and memorial sites create a physical connection for the grieving. For many families, these rituals become a form of support, reminding them of their eternal connection with the deceased. Touching the ashes, saying prayers, or even planting a tree at the burial site helps them come to terms with the end and begin to accept the new reality. Each society has its own approach to what to do with the ashes after cremation. Traditionally, the ashes are placed in an urn and kept at home or in a cemetery. Some prefer to scatter them at sea, in the mountains, or in the deceased's favorite places, symbolically returning the earth to the soul. In Russia, it is quite common to bury the ashes in the ground, creating small graves with crosses or monuments. This maintains a connection with the ancestors and clearly marks the place of memory. The environmental aspect of cremation deserves special attention in modern society. By cremating the body, it's possible to significantly reduce the space occupied by cemeteries, which is especially important in large cities. Cremation is considered one of the most environmentally friendly burial methods, as it minimizes contamination of soil and water resources. Furthermore, the process requires significantly fewer resources and materials compared to traditional burial rites, which has a beneficial effect on the health of residents and preserves natural resources. Modern urns and memorials offer a wide range of options, allowing you to preserve the memory of a loved one in a unique way. From biodegradable containers for natural burials to stylish interior vases, they reflect a person's individuality and allow for creative expression. Some families create memorial spaces by planting plants or erecting sculptures, symbolizing eternal life and rebirth, embracing the idea of the continuity of the soul's journey. Discussing cremation practices and the emotions associated with them plays an important role in society, helping to relieve tension and fear. Open conversations about death and farewells help reduce taboos and stereotypes, making the process of death more understandable and humane. Issues related to psychological support and rituals that help ease the burden of grief and strengthen a sense of community are increasingly being addressed in educational and spiritual communities. The experience of many people shows that even choosing cremation does not diminish their love and respect for the deceased. On the contrary, preserving ashes allows for a new form of connection and even the continuation of traditional monthly or annual memorials. For parents who have lost children, preserving ashes becomes a way to preserve memories and feel close, which can sometimes help them cope with tragedy and find inner peace. It's worth noting that the emotional response to cremation is often determined by personal history, cultural traditions, and religious beliefs. For some, fire symbolizes purification and transition to another world, while for others, it connotes loss and destruction. Understanding this complexity helps professionals develop a more sensitive approach to supporting those grieving and expand the scope of possible rituals. From an anthropological perspective, cremation symbolizes a profound philosophical perspective on life and death. Fire acts as an element of transition, linking the visible and invisible worlds. In cultures where fire is revered, the process of burning the body resembles the liberation of the soul, allowing one to imagine death not as an end, but as the beginning of a new stage of existence. Thus, cremation becomes not only a practical, but also a spiritual act. Recently, Russia and other countries have seen a growing popularity of alternative and eco-friendly ways to honor the dead. Memorial forests and parks are springing up, where people can plant a tree instead of erecting a traditional monument. Here, the ashes dissolve in the earth, creating a living memorial and upholding the idea of the natural cycle of life. These spaces help people find solace and release their grief in harmony with nature. It's also worth mentioning those who choose cremation for economic reasons. The cost of traditional funerals has risen significantly in recent decades, posing a significant obstacle for many families. Cremation is often seen as a more affordable and rational option, while still retaining the depth of meaning and respect for the deceased. This approach is increasingly gaining support among the younger generation. The ability to create a digital memorial page or virtual memorial has become an integral part of modern farewell rituals. A website with photos, memories, and videos helps gather friends and family in a single space, maintain connections, and share emotions. In this form, the memory of the deceased becomes not only personal, but also communal, strengthening a sense of belonging and continuing to live in the hearts of many. It is through a combination of traditional rituals and modern practices that people find their way to say their last words. It's important to understand that cremation opens up space for individual expression and a creative approach to memory. Ultimately, saying goodbye to a loved one is not so much about the body as it is about the soul, the emotional connection, and the story we hold dear. Saying goodbye to the ashes is more than just a matter of funeral logistics, but a profound act of love and respect. Families and communities are often involved in organizing this stage, fostering mutual support and a shared sense of loss. These moments bring people together, help them find a new understanding of life and death, and stimulate personal growth and spiritual development. The transition from a person's physical presence to memories and symbols in the lives of those who remain is made possible through rituals. For many, the urn containing the ashes becomes a symbol that connects heaven and earth, past and present. The memories preserved within it outlive the physical body, imbuing human existence with meaning and leaving a legacy for future generations. Thus, cremation today is not only a way to free the body, but also an important cultural phenomenon. This process carries both practical and profound philosophical significance. Modern society is gradually learning to perceive it with respect and understanding, taking into account the needs of the soul, psychology, and ecology. This approach helps create harmony between life and death. This theme will undoubtedly continue to evolve in the future, enriched by new discoveries and traditions. Respect for memory, environmental responsibility, and psychological support will remain key aspects uniting humanity as we navigate the inevitable. As we move forward, we can discover even deeper meanings of farewell and the continuation of the soul's journey.